Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod. A ceasefire deal between Hamas and Israel ready for approval. But what happens next? White House advisor Amos Hochstein brokered the Israel-Hezbollah deal, and he maps out the likely future here.
Day 14 or 16, you begin the negotiations over the phase 2 for the rest of the hostages so that you don't have to go back to fighting. And during that time, you find a political solution.
And TikTok, a U.S. ban set for Sunday. And a day later, TikTok's CEO is expected at the presidential inauguration. Media expert Rich Greenfield explains.
Whether or not it's good for America, it's pretty clear Trump likes TikTok, and Trump is going to save TikTok.
So you'll probably be able to scroll on.
Could it be a prospective threat? Sure. Is it an actual threat, as in they are doing something nefarious right this minute under the direction of the government? No.
Yeah, I mean, you have more confidence in that than I do.
Plus, the soon-to-be Treasury Secretary on the Hill and the dangers in dollars in the final frontier.
Jeff Bezos told me that he thought that Blue Origin, his company, would be worth more than Amazon.
Which is worth a lot. It's like a science fiction future.
It's Friday, January 17th, 2025. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue, please.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We're live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick, along with Joe Kernen and Andrew Ross Sorkin.
In his confirmation hearing for Treasury Secretary yesterday, Scott Bessent backed the extension of tax cuts from Trump's first term.
This is the single most important economic issue of the day. This is pass-fail. That if we do not fix these tax cuts, if we do not renew and extend, then we will be facing an economic calamity. And as always, with financial instability, that falls on the middle and working class people. We will see a gigantic middle class tax increase.
Bessent also outlined the rationale for imposing tariffs on our trading partners.
The American people should think about tariffs in 3 ways under the Trump administration. One will be for remedying unfair trade practices, either by industry or country. The Chinese tariffs, the steel. 2, maybe for a more generalized tariff as a revenue raiser for the federal budget. And 3, President Trump, I think, has added a third use of tariffs, as you said, as a skilled negotiator.
Bessent also said the Federal Reserve should be independent from the influence of the executive branch. Everything's so partisan, but there are some mic drop moments about oligarchs and other things. I think I didn't look today, but I think he's above 90% on the betting markets.
Yeah, I think he has been for quite a while.
Yeah, I don't even know how many nays he'll get at this point. Yeah. I liked watching his son Cole. It's like, yeah, I'm interested. I swear I am.
Tell me more about tariffs.
Yeah, tell me more about it.
And the dollar.
But he was very well. I think he would have looked more if they had caught me like dozing a few times. I think he was probably more interested than I could have probably pretended to be through all that. In a test flight, SpaceX's Starship spacecraft broke up after launch yesterday. It says here there were no people on board. Thanks for that. The company confirmed that the spacecraft was destroyed and said initial data indicates that a fire developed and it would continue to investigate the root cause. SpaceX said the debris fell into the Atlantic Ocean within the predefined hazard areas. The FAA, though, issued a warning to pilots of a dangerous area for falling debris, and multiple flights above the Caribbean were diverted before resuming normal operations. The rocket's Super Heavy booster, though, successfully returned to land at the launch site. And
It was caught. That's the second time that's only happened where it was caught from
with the chopsticks.
Well, what's that thing worth?
Yeah.
Just watching it, almost like a really good
fireworks.
It's SpaceX is a weird business. These things are so big and expensive and technologically advanced But what I saw Ron yesterday was
Ron Barron?
Yeah, talking about what he thinks SpaceX is going to be worth.
He's been a huge.
He thinks it's going to dwarf Tesla, and then he quoted Elon on what he thought it would be worth. It was even a multiple of what even Ron thought. But you need a lot of capital to do this, don't you?
Jeff Bezos told me that he thought that Blue Origin, his company, would be worth more than Amazon,
which is worth a lot. Yeah. Well, it's really a weird, it's like a science fiction future. It's like thinking about, and they liken it to the Arctic. If we can have an outpost in the Arctic where you can't go outside. You really can't do much up there. It's not that much different than the moon, in other words.
Correct.
It is. It's far, obviously
I'd feel a little better, I think, if something went wrong. Although I guess you're in just as much trouble if something goes wrong.
Unless, you can just go to the, part of the U.S., Greenland, on your way down from the Arctic and stop by there at like a Trump International hotel.
The Supreme Court could rule on a TikTok ban later today. The bipartisan law will ban the app in the United States on Sunday without intervention if something doesn't happen earlier. But the Biden administration saying they don't intend to enforce the ban before leaving office, instead allowing the incoming Trump administration to handle it. President-elect Trump's advisors are reviewing options to try to push back that deadline if the Supreme Court allows the ban to proceed. And that was at least the indications from some of the kind of questions that the justices were asking during the case. Reports say that TikTok plans to go dark in the U.S. when the clock hits midnight, unless there's a last-minute intervention. Worth knowing, the law doesn't require them effectively to go dark. They could actually just allow the app to continue to work, if you will, just not allow it to be downloaded or updated in the future, which would give them more time. There's a question about whether they're doing this also as a bit of a negotiating ploy itself to sort of force the issue a little bit differently.
Look, there's a question as to whether the incoming administration would actually enforce the law, but then that still puts the issue back on the big tech companies, Apple's and the others. Are you going to do something that's against the law, even if it's not being enforced? And will you be held to any repercussions down the road if you do that, too? There's all kinds of laws on the books that aren't always enforced, but if you're a public company and you violate a law, you may be held responsible down the road.
What did the famous Timothy Chalamet say? The winds, they are that was
Bob Dylan.
That was actually Bob Dylan. But
the winds, they are changing.
The TikTok isn't going anywhere.
Look,
I know you have, but that's why I thought yesterday, instead of being concerned about the TikTok CEO going, I thought you would say, see, I told you all. I thought you would take credit and embrace it, because you told us all along it was not a security thing.
I have said.
So I thought that
the minute one.
So instead of saying
that
grilling
all of this is a complete
That's what I
farce.
mean. So instead of grilling
folks.
John Cornyn and holding these guys, why let this guy come to the inauguration? I thought you would say, see, Andrew Ross Sorkin nailed this, and TikTok is not a security risk. It's a business.
Thank you, sir.
Good, but you didn't do it that way. You still used it.
The reason is you have in this case we had a senator on the broadcast
who voted against
it, who believes it should be banned, who believes it's a national security threat.
So
and my question is, if in fact you believe those things, then you have to believe that the CEO of TikTok is like a national security threat himself, that he's a spy.
Right.
That you have.
I got you.
You don't necessarily have to believe that. You have to believe that the Chinese government will be able to do whatever it wants.
It would be better if it wasn't owned by the Chinese.
The Chinese government. I mean, you don't think necessarily this guy's a spy, but the reality is any company in China, any company in China has to do whatever the Chinese government says.
Let me just say, I've known Show for a long time. I do not think he's a spy. I think he's a regular CEO like every other CEO. I don't think this company is a national security threat. I think everybody who's out there who's been saying this is wrong. I mean, I'll put it on the table.
I like it.
If you actually want that.
Wanted you to. That's why I brought it up.
But my view is take one side or really take one side or the other.
But,
do this
things
thing,
do
and it's a
change.
national security threat, and now it's okay because Trump says it's okay, or now it's okay because
Things
the
do
population
change.
wants
Things can
it,
change.
or this or that. That's what I will
Things
say.
can change. Who said that? Keynes or somebody?
I don't know. I think there are things that these senators who voted on this know that we don't know. I haven't been involved in the briefings on this. And I do think that any company that does business in China, that is a Chinese company, is going to have to do whatever the CCP says they have to do at some point, too.
Look, what I've said.
And by the way, if it's not a big deal, why are they so opposed to selling it?
What I've said, and I'll say it over and over again, is could it be a prospective threat? Sure. Is it an actual threat, as in they are doing something nefarious right this minute under the direction of the government? No.
Yeah, I mean, you have more confidence in that than I do. I don't know what they're doing right now.
I mean, if they want the information about what the youth in the U.S. are doing, they're welcome to it. You know what? There's nothing that interesting. I mean, they're wackos, but
you
there's
don't
nothing.
think that there's a way to influence what you think
Oh, you could
about
influence.
things? Whether
You know, with the way
they
the way they're being influenced right now, I'm not even sure it'd be any worse than what coming from China.
I don't know. If you talk to Jonathan Greenblatt or others,
I
they
know,
will
but
say
left to their own devices, they're
that this
crazy,
is why they think
crazy kids.
October 7th was not a big deal.
Youth is wasted on the young. Bah humbug.
Okay, we're all old cranks here.
Cheese will be next.
Still to come, what's holding up the ceasefire agreement in Israel, and what does it all mean for the world order as America plans to change leaders? We're joined by a White House official in his last days on the job, energy advisor Amos Hochstein.
Hamas is militarily defeated. Israel is recognized by both their friends and their foes alike as the strongest military. No one is doubting the power of the United States. So I think these are moments of opportunity.
Squawk Pod will be right back. You're listening to Squawk Pod with Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin.
Stand by, Joe. Here's Mike. Cue.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said negotiators have reached a ceasefire deal, ending 2 days of debate. If approved, it could take effect as early as Sunday. Joining us now, Amos Hochstein serves as senior advisor to President Biden for energy investment. And it's good to see you today, Amos.
Good to see you too, Joe. It's good to be on the show.
We're going to have to find out where you're headed, because this might be one of your final interviews. Only great things we all see for you, obviously, in the future. But while everyone's trying to take credit for this, and you've seen sort of the back and forth, and obviously the two teams worked very closely together. Both teams have said that, which is gratifying. I think there are some people, maybe, I don't know if you saw the piece in the Journal from the newspaper writer in Israel that said that actually President Trump forced the prime minister to make a deal that allows Hamas to maybe not only survive, but maybe even rebuild. And that maybe it should have been pushed back till after the inauguration.
Well, first, thank you for having me. I think it is my last interview, so I appreciate all the time with you over the last 4 years. Look, I think with all respect to the Wall Street Journal, no one forces Prime Minister Netanyahu to do anything. He's been around for a long time because he manages his politics fairly well, and he knows what he believes is the best thing for Israel. At the end of the day, we have to focus on is not credit, not anything else. It's two things. Number one, hostages, the first 3 hostages are coming home on Sunday after being in captivity for over 470 days. That is horrific. And the fact that they're coming home, I think, is the only thing we should be focusing on. The second thing is that I think something extraordinary happened here, where an outgoing president working together with the incoming team and Steve Witkoff going out to Doha to join the negotiator, Brett McGurk, who had been there for many days, and together seamlessly working to achieve that goal of ending the carnage, ending the suffering in Gaza, and bringing home all of the hostages, 33 of them in phase 1. I think that is what's most incredible here.
Was the notion of destroying Hamas once and for all, was that ever feasible, do you think? Because that's the point that this gentleman makes. Under the agreement, Hamas will be able to replenish its depleted ranks. 700 or more terrorists will go straight from Israeli prisons to the streets of Gaza. And it's a mistake that Israel has made in the past that sometimes comes back to haunt Israel. And additionally, goods, things can flow back into Gaza. Could it have been, if you waited till after the inauguration, would Israel have been more free to completely crush Hamas once and for all, almost? And was that ever a possibility, or not
First
feasible?
of all, I don't think it would have made any. You're talking about doing it next week or this week. I don't think it makes any difference. The Trump team was there as part of this negotiation. They reached the same conclusion that we did, that this was the right time to do it. And look, Israel, at some point in every conflict like this on the battlefield, you have to turn the battlefield gains, and Israel certainly has enormous battlefield gains here, into political gains. And the point of the war at the end of the day is to bring the hostages home and to have the security arrangements that Israel needs. Israel believes that it does have that. The Israeli military believes that. And I think that that's what you have to focus on, is what's the right moment to be able to do that. There's always, at any time you end a war, except for a World War II-like capitulation of the ending, you always have to make that decision. Remember, November 27, just 50 days or so ago, we announced the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, and that people thought it would only hold for 10 days. Hezbollah would immediately rearm. They have not. The ceasefire is holding. And in fact, that ceasefire is what gave us the ability to do this deal, because Hamas realized cavalry's not coming. They've been, Hezbollah is no longer in the fight. They made the deal. Israel now has a one-front war, not a two-front war. And for the first time in a long time, they came back to the negotiating table. So it's the same issue there, translating military gains into political gains. That's what happens at the end of conflicts.
It's food and goods and fuel, and we've always, obviously the humanitarian plight of people in Gaza has been very difficult to watch. But we know what happens to a lot of the goods and fuel that go into Gaza. We know how ruthless Hamas can be in terms of, not really caring whether it gets to the people that need it or not. That's going to resume as well. Is there anything that can be done to make sure that doesn't continue to happen, and just strengthen and allow Hamas to regenerate itself?
Look, no one, let me be very clear. No one, not in Israel, not in the United States, no one wants to see Hamas reestablishing itself. And that's why this agreement is about bringing hostages home, ending the conflict for now, for these 42 days, using this time to negotiate the phase 2 of the deal, while working with allies to establish a new security and civilian administration in Gaza that is not Hamas. We all recognize that you can't have a vacuum there, that then Hamas just starts its new 20-year buildup of weapons. But the Israelis are not going anywhere. The Palestinians are not going anywhere. And so we have to have something that could work. And continued war is not the answer. It's certainly not the answer for the hostages and their families who are coming home. So we recognize the risks. I think that the Trump team is going to come in and continue this process to try to figure out a political horizon that ensures Israel's security and gives Palestinians in Gaza a new hope to be able to live under a leadership that works. Look, the Middle East today, Joe, is dramatically different than what it was just a few months ago. Iran is weaker than it's been since the fall of Saddam Hussein. Its proxies are weaker. Hezbollah is degraded significantly. Assad is gone, and there's an opportunity in Syria. Hamas is militarily defeated. Israel is recognized by both their friends and their foes alike as the strongest military. No one is doubting the power of the United States. So I think these are moments of opportunity.
Amos, let me ask you this, though. As somebody who was in the middle of these negotiations, we had Dan Senor at the table just yesterday, and one of the things he said was that he believed that President Biden's rhetoric around his support for Palestinians and his support for ceasefires and for Gaza throughout put Israel in a box during these negotiations, not just in the negotiations, but even in terms of some of the things that they ultimately did, which, by the way, today makes them as strong as they are and put potentially them in the position to actually put this deal on the table in a way that they were unwilling to before. Do you believe that? Do you believe that any of the rhetoric that came from your boss made it more complicated, made it more difficult?
Look, we have been since October 7, we have been supporting Israel's right to defend itself from the first day when the president traveled there a few days after October 7 to the last day. We had some differences of opinion on tactics from time to time, but the overall goal of destroying Hamas's military capability has been something that the president has been committed to. Yes, we had some things that we did not see eye to eye on. We had some disagreements, but that was all in the tactical, not in the strategic. The strategic goal remained always to defeat Hamas's terrorist network and its military capabilities, and that's been achieved. And instead of focusing on one incident here and there, if you broaden the aperture and you look at the amount of weaponry and support that Israel received from the United States, it is enormous. Now, the president felt strongly that civilians in Gaza and innocent people in Gaza cannot starve to death in this conflict, and there are rules and norms that the international community puts in place for exactly this reason. And so this is the conversation we had about bringing humanitarian trucks in. As Joe said before, some of them were stolen and looted, so you have to adjust to those things. But I don't buy Dan's argument. And at the end of the day, the ceasefire that's today on the table, that the vast majority of Israelis support, was put on the table by President Biden in the summer. And we worked with Israel, and Hamas refused over the summer to come to a deal. After the Hezbollah negotiations were concluded, they decided to come back to the table. And now this is not Team Biden, this is now the same ceasefire that President Biden put on the table has now been agreed to by the parties, and at the encouragement and the mediation of both our team, led by Brett McGurk and Jake Sullivan and others, together with Steve Witkoff, who is the incoming envoy for President Trump. So I think that both teams recognize that at the end of the day, the strategy worked. Not everybody was ready for a ceasefire at the time that we had hoped, but I think that this is a day that we should be at least relieved that hostages can come home and civilians on both sides, innocent civilians, can be spared the death sentence that they have been facing.
Amos, as you mentioned, the Trump administration advising and being involved with these negotiations too, you expect that this situation won't change once there's a new administration that's in place? You think the same policy will be held out and that we will see the rest of the hostages come home in 2 more tranches?
Yeah, that's what my hope is, and that's why it was important to invite the Trump team to join those negotiations. They know the details. We're going to see the first tranche, 33 coming over a period of 42 days. So it's kind of a painful drip of hostages coming out. But I think the idea is that on, I think day 14 or 16, you begin the negotiations over the phase 2 for the rest of the hostages so that you don't have to go back to fighting. And that during that time, you find a political solution that allows for a security force to come in that is not Hamas to secure the area. And that you have a political leadership that does civil administration in Gaza that's neither Israel nor Hamas.
Almost good to have you on and get to talk about. There's a lot of testimony yesterday about the energy needs of the country. I thought some interesting back and forth that we saw yesterday. You were probably interesting, or at least watching to some extent. It could always be better, but we're doing pretty well with oil production. I wish we'd filled the SPR more. Are we going to talk about these things anymore? Refilled it more? Are you going to come on?
I hope so. I'll talk about it anytime. Joe, we refilled it by almost 60 million barrels, which is not what the expectation was. We're leaving the administration, Joe, with 13.4 million barrels a day of production. It's going to be a challenge to increase it further.
I gave you a chance. I opened the door for you. I gave you the chance to do that, to take the victory lap. You're welcome. You did. Almost thanks. And don't be a stranger. We'll see you. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
You might be like CEO of Exxon next or something if Darryl ever. He's on today, I think.
Yeah, Darren Woodson.
All right. Well, put in a good word for you, Amos.
Next on Squawk Pod, are you ready? TikTok, the wildly successful short-form video-sharing social platform, set to be banned in the U.S. as soon as Sunday. But media expert Rich Greenfield says the saga, from the halls of Congress to the SCOTUS to the Oval Office, is not over.
Whatever the Supreme Court says, whatever Biden does, all of it is totally irrelevant because Trump laid out the path for exactly how he's going to sidestep this law.
Welcome back to Squawk Pod.
TikTok facing a deadline today, but that could change. A Biden administration official saying they don't intend to enforce the ban before leaving office on Monday, of course. Instead, allowing the incoming Trump administration to handle it. Joining us right now, Rich Greenfield, Lightship Partners and co-founder of that firm. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
I'm not going to put words in your mouth. Your betting line here is what happens.
Well, look, I still continue to believe there's a chance the Supreme Court comes back and puts an administrative stay or puts an injunction in. But let's just say Supreme Court upholds the law. I know that's the betting logic among people who listened to last week. But let's just say the Supreme Court upholds the law. So this law goes into effect Sunday. First of all, I still can't comprehend why the Biden administration, they can kick the can down the road 90 days and completely make this a Trump deal. I don't know why they want this law to technically go into effect on his last day in office. It's just another way for the Democratic Party to continue to blow up their relationship with, people all around the United States. So that doesn't seem like a great Democratic strategy, but it's sort of all irrelevant. Whatever the Supreme Court says, whatever Biden does, all of it is totally irrelevant because Trump laid out the path for exactly how he's going to sidestep this law come Monday.
So explain it. What do you think he's going to do?
So Trump filed a brief in late December, Andrew, and that brief with the Supreme Court, his incoming Solicitor General filed a brief. And what it basically says, it cites Article 2. Article 2 defines what the president is allowed to do. And in 1937, there was a Supreme Court case called the Curtis Wright case. And what it basically said is that in international or foreign affairs, the president's powers are supersede Congress. He has powers that go beyond congressional grant of authority. He is the sole voice speaking for the nation in foreign affairs. And he actually uses those words in his brief. And so it really delineates, Andrew, the powers that he has domestically, really governed by the Constitution and Congress, and then on international affairs that go beyond the Constitution. And so Trump's going to say, this is a foreign affairs. This is China. This is my overall negotiation with China. This is not something Congress has the right to do. And he's going to put an executive order saying this doesn't apply.
Okay, but let's then just put it out there in a very straightforward way. You think ultimately, I believe, now I'm going to put words in your mouth. I think you think ultimately TikTok not only survives in the United States, but survives in the United States under the control of ByteDance, under the control of China.
I believe nothing is going to change. Correct. And I believe Trump is likely to trade something for that actually happening. I mean, look, on Sunday at Trump's rally, head of CEO of TikTok is showing up. On Monday evening, he'll be sitting on the dais with Trump. Like, it's pretty clear Trump likes TikTok. Trump wants TikTok to exist. He uses it very aggressively. We can debate whether that's good or bad. I do think it's interesting that of all the social media companies, the only one that had its algorithm monitored and its data monitored every day by Oracle is TikTok. But leave that aside, whether or not it's good for America, it's pretty clear Trump likes TikTok and Trump is going to save TikTok.
Okay, so if that is the case, for the last, and this goes to maybe the point I've been trying to make, but maybe people disagree with me on this. If that is the case, do we actually believe that TikTok is genuinely a national security threat today, prospectively, or otherwise?
Well, look, it's hard to look at historically it being a national security risk. If you look at the government's own filings, and this was brought up, I think it was by Justice Gorsuch, raised the point that there actually has been no evidence. The U.S. government has no evidence at all that there's been any manipulation of an algorithm or spying on U.S. citizens to date by China. So that's factually correct. Meaning nothing has happened.
Why is that not said aloud then? I mean, by the way, you and I may be the only people who are saying this.
look, it's in the case. Like, it's literally on the, you can
It's in
read
paper,
that
black and
comment.
white. If you want to go read it, go read it. But I'm saying I can't tell you how many other people come on our broadcast and say all sorts of other things.
Covert, or, these covert documents or things that have only been shared. I mean, we know nothing has happened to date. Now, is there debate of whether things have or haven't happened overseas? I mean, I think even if you read the oral arguments or listen to the oral arguments, there's this whole discussion at one point about the government attacking TikTok for what they've done in Hong Kong. I was just in Hong Kong, Andrew. TikTok doesn't exist in Hong Kong, so I don't even know what the government's talking about. But leave that all aside. The reality is there a threat long term of spying or data leakage? Sure. I don't think anyone could dismiss that there is that impact, that the algorithm
100%.
could be manipulated. Is that enough of a national security risk? That's obviously something that, I guess ultimately the president has to decide, not Congress. And I think that's what you're going to see is Trump's going to make the decision on whether that is enough of a risk to force maybe a change in the monitoring, maybe more stringent monitoring, maybe a partial owner from the U.S. I don't know. I just think next week, all of your viewers who are watching right now and worried,
Will
they're
still be
going
on
to be
TikTok.
using TikTok.
We got to run. Have you downloaded the new app that everybody's doing? Red Note.
I have not downloaded Mao's Little Red Book. I have not,
Red
Andrew.
Book, yeah.
That actually scares me. That's actually servers in China, not servers in Texas, monitored by Oracle.
Have you watched Landman yet, Rich?
I have not. What do you think, Joe?
I love it.
I'm finishing Black Doves as we speak right now.
What's that, Led Zeppelin? What
No, Black
Dog?
Doves. I don't know who made it. It's British, but it's on Netflix.
I tried to.
Oh, wait. Is that the one with Keira Knightley?
Keira Knightley? Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, no. I started watching. That was too weird.
Oh, you did, Joe, so you're lying.
That's Squawk Pod for today, this Friday, and for the week. The weekend is finally here. A programming note for you. Monday is the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. The markets are closed. It is also January 20th, which every 4 years is the date for this country to inaugurate a new leader. Becky Quick will be hosting special coverage of Donald Trump's second inaugural on CNBC beginning at 8 a.m. And we will have fresh podcast content for you Monday morning. If you are a follower, you get our podcast every day in your feed. No need to search it out. If you're not, make it easy on yourself. Hit that follow button and don't miss a minute. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernen, the aforementioned Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. This podcast is produced by me, Katie Kramer, and Cameron Costa. John Lazaration is our editor. We'll all meet you right back here on Monday. Have a great weekend.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.